Well, I can tell if I get the right speaker, I get the right audience. This is very cool. You all know Peter Brant, Mariano Aguirre, and Nick Manifold. And tonight they're going to tell us the story of White Birch Farm, which is the winningest organization in American polo.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us here today. It's very, very nice. I haven't actually been in this room for a long, long time, so it's a pleasure being here. And we've just come here to play in the high goal tournaments here, which we're all looking forward to. And we just got our brains beat out in the 20 goal tournament, but we have high hopes for the tournaments coming, and it's nice to be here. Maybe just to give you a history of White Birch, and a lot of people that I see in the room probably know the history as well as I do. But we started playing polo. It was actually Alan Jerkins and Tommy Glenn, both really great horsemen. Introduced me to the game. I was first involved in horse racing, and was a great admirer of Alan Jerkins, and he was a very good friend of Tommy Glenn's, and they kind of convinced me to play indoor polo at Ox Ridge, which is in New Canaan, Connecticut, and it was a terrific game. I was really a rackets player as a kid and into college, and tennis and squash, and was a soccer player, and so I really like the idea of playing a team sport as you know, as a young adult. I started playing when I was about 28 or 29 years old, and so it was kind of late starting. I had, you know, ridden a bit. I'd ridden horses in Colorado where I went to school, and then when I was a young kid in camp in the Adirondacks, I rode quite a bit there. But I really found the ability to play this sport was more tied to the ability to play racket sports. Helped me more than just being able to ride. I picked up the riding a little bit just while I was playing, because you kind of have to learn how to ride if you're going to play. So we were all members of, you know, we were members at Ox Ridge and Fairfield Hunt Club, and Tommy Glenn was organizing the polo in both places. He came out of Blind Brook, and he was very responsible for the polo and involved in the Northeast Circuit. So we started playing indoors and liked it, and met Tom Goodspeed, and who became a great indoor player, and he kind of helped me along. And then I had met through Tommy Glenn, Benny Gutierrez, who's a great American player, and he had just had his accident playing polo, and was kind of not working for anybody, and they'd lowered his handicap, and so I started playing with Benny, and we had, you know, we played a lot in the lower and, you know, medium goal tournaments, and, you know, had some success here and there. We played at Brandywine and Myopia, and we played out in Long Island and Connecticut. So then I was hooked, line, you know, and sinker, and then I started to, I built the first field in Greenwich, which was kind of a drastic mistake, because we wanted to play on it quickly, and we sodded the field, and it wasn't exactly the safest field when we started playing on it, but we learned our lesson, and it became a really nice field. And then when we got involved in some more land across the road in Conyers Farm, we built, you know, 2 more fields, and we started to I actually, the first person that I ever played with in high gold polo was Stevie Orthwine was here. We played with Eddie Moore, and we had a high gold team. We got killed by the Cressidas, but you remember that. I don't remember that. But and then of course I knew Peter Orthwine, who's a neighbor of mine and very close friend, and Adi van Guntard, who was related to these guys, and we all had a great time playing in the East, and I must say that through all the years, we just named one of our fields after Peter Orthwine because he's been such a stalwart supporter of the Greenwich Club, and he's always put in a team, and he keeps on saying every year he's going to quit, and he never does, and so then I'm coming down to Florida and starting to play there. I first went over to England and met Hector Barantes, who became a very close friend, and his wife Susie, and we became very close friends, and we, decided we were going to play with Gonzalo Pires, who, really was in a class by himself at that moment. He was really an outstanding player, and one of the greatest players I've ever seen play the game. He was, just a natural. I mean, he could literally, he would smoke and have a hot dog at halftime and get out on the field and just play, 10 plus goals. He was a really great polo player, and became a very, great friend. And of course, his daughter, who's married to Mariano, Tati, I've known her since she was a little girl, and maybe she was 3-4 years old. So we've been very fortunate to have the ability to play with the same players for many years, and always try to encourage younger players to play with us, and we'd give them jobs around the barn, and they'd have chances to practice with us and then play in tournaments. And we would get accused of carrying ringers, but these were really like young kids that were trying to get up and play in the game and have the opportunity to play on good teams. Of course, everybody wound up doing that, and so a lot of the sponsors became sponsors of younger players. We sponsored a lot of American players, a lot of Argentinian players, many younger players who today are, it's hard for me today because, playing kind of the last 10 years, I'm playing against kids who literally saw them as babies, and it's really these now are the best players in the game, and to try to run up and down the field with them is tough. So throughout the 80s, played with Gonzalo Pires, and we won many tournaments and had great success. And then when Mariano came aboard, he played with us and played with Alfonso Pires and Paul Pires, Polita's father, and because he played with Michael Shore, who's a great friend of ours, and also a great supporter of the Greenwich Club, who passed, and Paul Pires played with him. So during that time, the Falkland Islands War came about, and most of these Argentinian players played in Greenwich, and so we had the opportunity of seeing and playing in the highest level. And it's just been it's been a great life playing. We've had our ups and downs, but mostly ups. And I love the game. I've always loved playing in the game. It's as exciting to me to play a practice as it is to play, in a final. I have as many people remind me, my friends who don't really know that much about polo, they tell me that I have a reputation of being a bit of a hothead out there, and maybe as you get older, calm down a little bit. It used to be true. I guess it's still true. But all I can say is, I'd love to answer anybody's questions. I have nothing but the best things to say about the game, and I have no ill feelings towards really anybody. I mean, I got robbed a couple of times in tournaments, but I've forgotten them.
So, Mariano, what his impression was when he first went to work, first went up there, and how old was he?
Well, good evening. When I first came to Greenwich was through Fernando Monteverde, who was Gonzalo Pires' probably his right hand. He helped him a lot, and he knew my family. And at that point, I started playing polo when I was a little kid, but we couldn't afford to play like all the time. So we moved to Buenos Aires. I started playing some other sports, but I never forgot how to play polo. For that reason, I was 16 years old, and I wasn't competing, so my handicap was 0. And they needed a 0-goal player to play with Gonzalo, Peter, and Hector. And one day I came back from school, and my mother said, "Listen, you need to get your passport and stuff. We'll receive a phone call that if you're willing to go, they invited you to play polo." That's what I wanted to do my entire life. So I never hesitated for a second. But I've never been out of the country before, so I didn't have a passport. I didn't have boots. I didn't have anything. So but I got on the plane, and I never got off it. I was 16. Yeah. So it's been great. I got lucky to hit in one of the biggest organization in polo at that point, for sure, and throughout the history of the game, I think White Birch is the biggest organization out there. Even though I've been playing for so many years, 30 years we're playing together with Peter, I still admire what he accomplished, because he's the head of the whole organization, and with the people, the sport lives because of people like Peter, I feel.
I just wanted to say that I remember the first game that he played very, very well, and I also remember, and he became a 10-goal player for many years, and very successful, great, strategist and player and maker of horses. But that first game, we weren't doing that well, I remember, and Hector Barantes might have yelled at him a little bit. And he started to cry. And he was 16 years old, and he was so disappointed in the way he had played, at least for the first half. And then he improved his game a lot the second half, and it was all smiles. But I thought that I'll never forget that. He really had tears in his eyes.
He's requesting a...
I'm sorry.
Peter, you have the reputation of having done everything perfectly well. I mean, you've always carefully selected your players ahead of the tournaments so that you had a chance of success. But one of the things that I wondered actually was the one, if anyone was, that influenced you to start buying the best horses from day one?
All the people that I was associated with, I have to give credit to, certainly Benny Gutierrez was, really good horseman, and he really wanted to have the best horses, and he respected Eddie Moore a lot, who really, had a good eye for a horse and wanted to be mounted well, and wanted the teams he played on to be mounted well, and then probably Hector Barantes, above all of them, was a true horseman, and really, he really wanted to put together the best string and breed the best string, and he knew that because we were involved in racing, that we had great love for the thoroughbred and for the bloodlines, and which we tried to bring into the polo world, which is taken very well. I mean, the Argentinian families all believed in the bloodlines and thoroughbreds and what nicks worked for them, and I think that was, we were always talking about horses. I mean,
Just a follow-up question. I think you were one of the first ones to start shipping thoroughbred mares to Argentina.
yeah.
What year was that? Do you remember?
That was probably 82 or 83. And we also believed in like thoroughbred male lines that really produce good female lines, and so female blood that in the pedigree, which we believe work very well for polo breeding. Yeah, I think they are. I think they are. Excuse me. I think they are, because they're more precocious, and it's tougher to get a colt, with their mind on the business, and the same for even a gelding. So. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your history with the East Coast Open. I know that's a pretty
Well, I mean, one of the things that I remember the most every time I ever played, like at Myopia, was the guy that's sitting next to you. He was tough. I mean, he always had big, strong horses, and he knew how to bump with them really well. So I remember those days very well. It was always a pleasure playing up there. Such a beautiful club and beautiful locker room, and really, great tradition. And I knew a lot of the members, and it was always fun going up there. And I really kind of miss that. I mean, I miss driving from Connecticut up to Essex, Massachusetts, and I would always sort of stop at the same hamburger stand to get a hamburger, and I really enjoyed it. I remember that very well, and I miss that. The East Coast Open, we won it, a number of times, but had not always played in it. But I think it's a great tournament, and it used to be more in the summer months. Now it's in the fall, and this last year we played was an incredible game, finals of the East Coast Open. Really, that was one of the games that we got robbed in.
Peter, tell us the story of 2005 and why it was so important, what led up to it.
You mean in 2005, we had a very good year in 2005?
You won everything, but
Yeah.
it had eluded you for a few years.
Yeah, I guess I think that it's very difficult now because you know the game has changed so much. You have so many of these players that are great players and they mount themselves really well. And you know, it's back earlier in the '80s when we were playing. You know, you would have 12 or 14 teams, and you could count. You know, you could pick like 8 or 9 of them that you figured had no chance because of the horses. You can't do that now, and all these teams are so tough. And sure, they have fewer of them. Maybe one of the reasons they have fewer of them is because they're all so tough. And so I think that it's much tougher to win now than it was. The game is more competitive. A lot of the players are, you know, back in the earlier times, these players would come up to Florida and they'd sell the patron, the Patron 6 horses. 2 of them, you know, would be good. 4 of them donkeys, you know, and basically they'd just wing it. And if they lost one of the 2 good ones, they had no chance. So that you know, that's changed. The players know that they have to be well mounted to play well, and everybody is mounted well, and you have the combination of the best players on different teams. It's a very tough polo here now. Yeah, that was a good year.
Did you win everything in 2005?
Yeah, I think we had a very good year in 2005.
I think I can remember Mariano. I think he went crazy at the end of the game. Really? Do you remember?
Yes.
Throwing your mallet in the air. It's one of the best photographs I've ever seen.
But actually, one of the things that few people realize today is that the U.S. Open, you know, at that point was a different tournament than it is today. And what was the Cartier International Open really was the U.S. Open in the sense if you replaced it with where it is today. So we brought the U.S. Open in and we kind of lost the tournament because you had a 26-hole tournament that was occurring in the fall, and so now you don't have that anymore. You have the U.S. Open where the Cartier International Open was. And you know, the seasons were very competitive, but I'm just saying the teams, you know, the teams now are closer, more even. Stevie.
Whereas in the 80s, when you were involved with getting, I think it was a Cup of the Americas or
Yes.
international match on television, and I know that the USDA is very interested in, you know, marketing and getting polo on television. Do you want to kind of say a little bit about that experience?
Well, I think that you know, that was not a very good experience. I mean, we had a great success in 2000. We had a great success doing it in sort of 86 or 87. It was very successful, and financially it was pretty successful too. We sold sponsors. We bought the TV time ourselves, and then we sold. You know, we basically gave it, sold it to the.
Last time the TV was really on a major network.
Right.
Really on a major TV.
It was, we had it on 3 years, and it was the most successful the first year, and it was played on after Sunday night football, after Sunday afternoon football, and it was edited, so it wasn't a full, you know, 2-hour game, hour and a half game. It was cut down to an hour, but. I think the problem is, in terms of the marketing, is always in polo in the last 30 years, last 40 years, there have been too many factions trying to create marketing events for polo. So it's never come from one central place. So sponsors, you know, they don't know whether they're dealing with a club or the USPA or what they're doing, and that's what has created, that's what stopped the sport from going further. It's a great sport. The technicality of the longer field and the shots, and that can all be overcome, but and it certainly worked that day, but it has to be presented in, you know, in a more central way, and I think then it'll be very successful.
I have to ask your opinion, and I'll tell you my opinion, which I probably shouldn't, but, you know, from ESPN, I know has talked to the Argentine Polo Association about trying to make the game more action, less time, downtime, and we've got now here challenges and reviews and all those calls. I think polo needs to have minimal downtime and more action time, but I don't know, what's your thought on that?
I mean, I think that's absolutely true. It has to be more, you know, there's the safety factor, of course, that you have to discuss. But I think from a standpoint of you know, of a fan coming to a game, yeah, they want to see it move. But that can be, I mean, that can be worked out. But until you centrally have one body that is trying to promote it on, you know, behalf of the clubs, it's not going to work. You know, it just there are too many factions, too many people competing against each other, too many people like undercutting one another. It's really the sponsors themselves don't, you know, they don't know who they're dealing with.
Peter?
Yeah.
You don't find that like the USPA should take a bigger role in doing that? And I mean, combined with the fact that they have so much money rolling in now?
I think that they should. I think that they should take a bigger role because, not only because of the money coming in, but I think they should take a bigger role because when they don't take a bigger role, they put their foot in it anyway, so it clogs it up. You know, because they don't want to give it up to entrepreneurs to do. They want to. They really want to be involved. So if you want to be involved, you should control the whole thing, and. You know, there are certain sport bodies that are very successful. The NBA, the NFL, you know, baseball, they're all very successful, and they have that one philosophy where they pretty much control the professional side of the sport.
Do you think they'll ever, like the 40 goal, they have a 2-point conversion? Will they do that in a regular match? I think it brings that game.
I mean, that has to evolve on its own according to what fans like, but you're never going to get to even discuss it unless you're, you know, you're in the game. And in order to be in the game, you can't see players like playing on one team and then on another team and then on another team. It's hard to have, you know, it's hard to root. So you really have to combine the tournaments, like you're talking about the Argentine Open, the U.S. Open. You have to combine those tournaments, and then you really have something to market.
You had a very fast race, what's called coach.
Yes.
Did you ever try to bring in Argentine mares?
I don't think I ever bred him to any Argentine mares, but because I bred a lot to him. You know, we bred a Kentucky Derby winner by Gulch, Thunder Gulch, and he, unfortunately, I sold him as a yearling, but you know, we won the Derby with Swale and with Claiborne Farms, and that was a great thrill. And Gulch won the Breeders' Cup, and he was he just passed the other day. He died, and he was a great horse. He was sound as a rock, and he won the Metropolitan Mile twice, and was by Mr. Prospector, and yeah, really good horse. And we actually bought Mr. Prospector when I was playing polo down here in Florida, and from the Savin family, and brought him to Claiborne, where he stood stud. But no, I mean I've fooled with some Argentinian mares to race, but they were no account for me. They didn't really work out.
Peter, one other question about the White Birch. What should we expect out of White Birch in the next coming years? You've been away for a while. Are you
Yeah.
going to continue to come and play here?
Well, my son is playing now. He's gotten interested in polo, Chris, and I've had a number of sons play, but then they're committed to doing other things, working and making their own life. So, but Chris, lives on our farm, and he's a very successful guy, and he played in the East Coast Open last year, and I'd like to see him do it, and I'd like to continue playing as long as my bones will allow me to.
Mr. Oxley played till he was 83.
Yeah. I'm not making any promises, but my promise is that the one I make to Peter Orthwine, that I won't quit before he quits. That's for sure.
Being a higher rated amateur player changes the dynamics of how you lay out your team for obvious reasons. Can you talk a little bit about how White Birch over the years evolved as a team unit? If your handicap went up, what were you looking to do? And how did you play a typical game? Because obviously you're a major factor on the field and you don't have a handicap.
I don't know. I think when you're a higher goal player, and then your rating starts to go down, you know that you must be not playing as well as you did back then, but you don't really feel it. But you feel like you're still doing a lot of the same things, but it's just not as quick, and maybe your anticipation is not as good. But I think in putting a team together, when I was 7 goals, we won the World Cup, but we chose Bautista Heggie to play, number 1. It's all about the team. The couple of goals here and a couple of goals here are not gonna do it. You have to have a really good team, and you've got to have 2 guys that really are generals on that team, and they've got to complement one another, and you have to have horses that complement the position that they're playing. So you have to have a perfect combination of, horses that really are good at number 1, horses that are good at number 2, horses that are a little handier and good at 3, and horses that are good for a back. You can switch the horses. Some of them can play any position, but most of them can't. So it's very important.
Understood. Where did you enjoy playing most on the field? Where were you most comfortable with that? Back?
Yeah, probably. I always thought that the best thing was if you could play. I always played the best when I could play 1 and then go to back. Like in the same season or same tournament, because at 1 you were much, quicker, and then that helped you when you went back. And also, I always thought that when I played squash before I would play polo, that would help me a lot. It's like guys that ride races think that ping pong helps them.
What would you say were the issues that you would say for the USBA or for whatever happens in polo that are the most important things that they take care of and they can do right, and how would they do it for the future of the sport? What would you, if you were looking at the future, how would you say that the sport should proceed?
I'd talk to you like a marriage counselor. You got to communicate. That's basically it. They have to communicate with their constituency because it varies so much, their constituency, and they've got to be, like now they communicate a lot better than they did, 15, 20 years ago. It's not as much of a, good old boy network. It really, you know, the days going back to our friends like George Haas and guys like that, they, you know, they loved the game and they really tried to help the game, but they had a different philosophy. And they don't want to see, you know, they don't want to see the game getting publicity or commercialize it or do anything. They wanted the opposite. So, you know, I think that now I've been very impressed with, you know, what I've seen in the USPA. Like, I feel a change coming, and I think that's really good. Before, I sort of felt like I'm not going to bother with them. They have their own idea, and that's what they want to do, and you know, and that's it. They've been around longer than I have, so let them do it. It's not a, you know, I'm not hungry for power or anything. So basically, I think now I feel more positive about it.
How long has Nick been?
I keep on asking him that. He doesn't really ever give me an answer. Nick, how long?
Since 1990, I was fortunate to meet Hector Barantes. I grew up in Australia, and when I was 18, I went to work for him for 3 years in Argentina. And then he passed away in 1991, I think. And then I came up to Palm Beach with Carlos Cristina and got a job then grooming at White Birch, and that's about it. Moved on.
Peter, what's the best team you ever had? I know you have many. Can you name one?
I think the best team, I don't necessarily think that they were the best players, but the best team was probably, as I remember, it was probably myself, Gonzalo Perez, Alfonso Perez, and Paul Perez. That was a very, very good team. We had a lot of, you know, success with that team in the World Cup. When playing with Mariano and playing with Cambiaso was that was a good team. But I think that as I remember back then, when you only can judge a team by who you're really playing against. So if you're playing against competition that is not as good and you don't know that at the time, then you have an image of of having things happen very easily. But we've had a lot of good teams. I mean, we've played with a lot of great players. We played with Mike Asaro. We played with Carlos Cristina. Played, we played with Bautista. We had a really good season with Bautista, and we almost won the U.S. Open with Bautista. We lost in an overtime.
That was armed robbery.
Pardon?
That was armed robbery.
That was one of the robbery moments. Yeah.
It's not my. I was sitting next to the president of the USPA, and that was his comment.
Yeah, but the thing is, in all fairness, that's the way we felt about it. But it also gave me the opportunity to see Carlos Cristina make the greatest play that I ever saw in my life. So, which he did to tie the game up, and he had Mariano like slash hooking him, and he cut the ball from the boards literally and scored a goal. So that was a great thrill, and I miss Carlos Cristina. He's a really great guy.
Your best pony?
Pardon?
Your best pony?
My best pony was probably I had her when she was older, but Leviku was my best pony, I think. I had another great pony that passed away up at Saratoga, which was a daughter of your great mare, the one that died on the field. She was a great horse.
She died at Saratoga, you remember there. She was your great mare that had so many great horses.
And I had a horse called 50 that was a really great horse. I'm sorry?
Prince Charles,
I played with Prince Charles many times, and he.
but you won a couple of tournaments with him.
We won a couple of tournaments at up in when he came to Florida. We won a couple, yeah. But in England, I played against him. Never played with him.
Peter, Mariano has 600 horses. How many horses do you have?
Altogether, I'm probably only carrying myself now about 35, 40.
What difference do you see in today's polo as it was back in the 80s? Do you see a big difference in the type of play?
It's just more competitive. More competitive. It's there's the players are playing year round. They're trying to compete year round. So probably it makes them better for a shorter period of time because it's harder on them to do that. But it's much more competitive. Competitive on the horse side. Competitive on the player side. When we used to play here, they didn't. They weren't playing as much polo.
Do you intend to take White Birch around the circuit or just play the stage?
I think what we're going to do is play in the Eastern Circuit and play here in Florida. Unless somebody invites us someplace. Well, thanks for having us.